Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second TMI Rewind episode in a row. The three of us are still recovering after our New Year's break, and we will be back next week with brand new programming, brand new reviews. But this particular episode, we are rewinding back to September the 11th, 2019, and we are revisiting episode 76, which featured Jeff and I running down our top 5 after-school shows. Now, this episode was a whole lot of fun to research and record. So listen in to our conversation, and maybe one or two of our top 5 picks will be the same as yours. And again, tune in next week. Christina, Jeff, and I will be back with a brand new episode. But for now, to whet your appetite, please enjoy episode 76 and listen to us revisit our favorite after-school shows. Enjoy.
The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Mike Mjolnir Evans. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Welcome, Jeff. It's just you and I.
Jim, welcome.
Flying as a duo today.
Yes. I was kind of jealous, too, because when you and Mike were solo, you called yourselves a dynamic duo. We don't have a nickname. We're just Jeff and Jim, or Jim and Jeff.
Yeah, maybe we could take over that dynamic duo title today, because today is very apropos. We are talking about after-school children's programming, I think is a good term for it.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay. It's not exactly limited to cartoons, so we're keeping this open. So if you remember, way back in the dark ages of TMI, back when we had 5 members, once again, Jeff and I found ourselves alone on one Sunday morning, and we decided to do a special episode of our favorite Saturday morning cartoons. And that one proved pretty popular. So all these episodes later, we're going to revisit that theme, but we're talking about afternoon programming today. And we say that because a lot of the stuff that you used to see after school was not, in fact, a cartoon. So we want to be inclusive of everything.
That is true.
And I am not bringing up the 4:30 movie again.
What? You're not? I would have put money down that was your number one show. Well, we know how well it shaped you, so I'm shocked.
Yeah. Just like Jeff always has that Death Race 2000 in his back pocket, I've also got the 4:30 movie.
And at one point, we have to watch it.
Yeah. So, and of course, I've got some honorable mentions as well that didn't quite make my top 5 list.
Yep.
It was just too many. And it was so fun going back, just all these things that I barely remembered, looking online to try to jog a memory of what a show was called, or if I'm actually was dreaming it, or if it is an actual memory.
Fantasized it.
And I found everything I was looking for, I found. So
wow, I'm actually surprised. I had to dig a little deep. I've made mention on this show that I had limited television for a number of my informative years. Between 80 and 85, we had 3 channels. So ABC, NBC, and CBS. Yeah.
Wow.
I know. Yeah.
You
showing
see,
my age right there.
None of those channels had that content.
Well, that's the problem. So at least 2 on my list are local programming.
Are soap operas? General Hospital, Edge of Night?
One of them is a soap opera. My number 5 is a soap opera.
Oh, I spoiled it.
That's why shocker.
So you never had WPIX Channel 11, WNEW Channel 5?
So I did. What you have to realize is that, I moved around a couple times, and we lived in town for a little bit, and I did have exposure to PIX. But like I said, from like 80 to 85, once we moved up on the hill, like we had nothing. We had an antenna, and we got those 3 channels. Mm-hmm. But I spent a fair amount of time at my grandfather's house down in town in Corning, and he had not only all 13 channels, but he also had HBO.
Okay.
So I caught up pretty quickly, but that's where I got my PIX fix.
Now, it's important to note that if you've never listened before, that we are both located in the New York area. So any channels we refer to, if we say channel 7, channel 4, channel 2, channel 5, and 11 are going to come up a lot on this episode. These are the New York area iterations of these stations. Yeah. So just in case you're confused, if your channel 7 or channel 5 did not show the stuff that we're talking about, it's because we're in the New York area.
Yeah, you're going to find out pretty quickly. You're going to figure out our age based on our choices here.
We're going to show our hand very quickly.
Listen, I wear my age on my sleeve, loud and proud. It is what it is, right?
And on my face, too.
There you go, on your face. I'm withering away as we speak.
Yes, Sonny. Back when I was young, I only had 3 channels. I had to get up and turn the station.
That's right.
When I couldn't find the remote.
Remote? We didn't have a remote.
The remote had one big push button, and that was it.
My remote was my little sister.
And it clicked.
Change that channel? So let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. We're going to do a top 5 with honorable mentions, as I said.
Yeah, so in other words, we're going to be all over the place.
We're going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
And there's nobody to say I have a hard end time of such and such. So we may go rambling on for forever. So
well, that is usually our MO. If it's just the two of us, we seem to be
these are the longest of the episodes.
Yeah, because that Saturday morning cartoon, that was our first, just the two of us. Up to that point, we were 5 and strong, and I think Jim and I realized pretty quickly we can do this.
Yes, so absolutely. I think
and people listen to it. So.
And it was preferable.
Well, you got to word it. I had to learn how to, just kind of temper my reaction sometime and let other people speak. There's that great line in Pulp Fiction, which is, are you somebody who actually listens, or you just wait for your turn to speak? And you have to think about that sometimes. You're like, you know what? There was a couple episodes where you put in a laugh track, and that elevated my ego to.
Yeah, I think that's very warranted for this episode, because maybe at least one of the shows I picked does have a laugh track. So
mine don't have laugh tracks, but one of them has a chuckle patch.
That may be a contentious pick. We'll get to it once
we'll get into it.
Do you want me to start?
Go for it.
My list? Okay, my number 5, and we may blend into each other's lists here. So you may hear some repetition because we have not shared with each other what we're going to unleash upon you.
No, that is one thing. If you've never listened to the show, when we review a movie, we go into this recording and the three of us are clueless as to what the other thought until we actually hit record.
It's as if we're playing the final round of Family Feud, and the 2 people have gone into that soundproof booth, and they cannot hear the answers the other one is saying. I always used to wonder about that. Was it like a green room that they went into? Like Dawson's people ushered that one family member into this room with a blindfold and with a.
That's probably so he could manhandle them.
That's probably
He liked to kiss people a lot.
Yeah, that was another big afternoon thing. If you were sick from home, you either saw Family Affair, The Monkees, stuff like that, or game shows.
Game shows. I think game shows played at least until 12, and then soap operas came on. So Price is Right was always a big one, and that was an hour-long show from 11 to 12.
So, and Let's Make a Deal. Let's not forget about that one.
Let's Make a Deal. Yeah.
For everybody. That was fun because everybody in the audience came dressed in costumes.
You still got that's still going strong, by the way.
It is, yes, it is. I've seen
Wayne Knight. Is it? No, not Wayne Knight.
Wayne Brady.
There you go.
Getting into the top 5, my number 5 is an out-and-out classic, and definitely the oldest show on my list, Little Rascals.
Oh.
And there was a number of different iterations of the Little Rascals, because I think it spanned for maybe 15, 20 years. So you had your initial kids that had
Alfalfa.
Perry White. Is that the character from Superman that I'm?
Yeah.
Jackie Cooper.
That's his character. Yeah.
Jackie Cooper was in the original our gang of Little Rascals. And then as the years went on, you saw Spanky as a baby. He got older, and then Alfalfa and Darla, Buckwheat, the classic lineup.
Okay.
So Just some of my favorites of that, just because of it was like a Three Stooges kind of a
slapstick. Yeah, there was.
slapstick.
Oh,
Yeah,
Miss Crabtree.
The Charge of the Light Brigade.
Yeah.
Classic episodes like that. They're riding down a hill in a golf course on a section of fence, and they're running down golfers, but they're flying up into the air.
Flying them, yeah.
I used to love that episode, and I always used to call back to that whenever I would see a Muppets episode. You'd see puppets flying up in the air. So it just pleased, and it still does, pleases my inner 7-8.
I have not seen those shows in years. I catch the Three Stooges every now and again, but I can't tell you the last time I came across the Little Rascals.
Little Rascals. Yeah, you can see them on Amazon Prime. It's free on Amazon Prime. So that's how I saw some of the episodes, just to call back for this one here. So they're out there. If you look on YouTube, if you look on Amazon.
So the urban legend that Bill Cosby bought the rights and pulled them all is not true.
Maybe he needed to sell those rights for some court fees.
Well, that was long before that ever happened. But I got some Jello pudding pups. Come over here, I got a roofie for you.
But
he went downhill.
But
that guy was beloved. He was an American treasure.
He was. It's still hard for me to reconcile all this. It is still hard. But that was an urban legend for a long time, that he bought up the rights just so he could suppress it from the public.
Because it was, there was a lot of stuff that happened in the 30s that would never fly now on television. Very racially charged.
But watching it as a kid, you don't.
No, they all got along. Do you remember the one where they made a pie or something? They were in the whoa.
Yeah.
Remember that sound effect, right?
Yes.
The pie was like expanding and going.
Yeah. Yes, and then it exploded, I think, in the end, right?
Yes, I believe that was the case. Yeah. They put like mouse traps and everything else inside it.
Little Rascals, my number 5.
There you go. I like it. You're right, though. That was on a lot. Well, I'm going to go serious because my number 5 was, you just mentioned soap operas.
Yes.
And my brother and I used to race home to watch this. And I had to do a fair amount of digging to come up with it. It was a Australian soap opera that aired from 1979 to 1986. So I'm going to say in between 80 and 84. This was on every day, 4:00, and it was called Prisoner Cell Block H. Now, I guess apparently in the UK and US, that was the title, but everywhere else in the world, it was just called Prisoner. And it was a women's detention center. It was like the original Black is the New Orange. And every week, you'd have people being shanked. There would be like prison riots. There was lesbian stuff going on. It was crazy, but we loved it, and we couldn't wait to watch it. It was not kids' fare by any means.
How did you see this? What channel was this on?
It came out of, it must have come out of probably, I couldn't find what channel we would watch it on, but it was available in the US. So it probably was either a station that came out of Syracuse or Elmira.
Wow.
Which were like my 2 local affiliates.
So broadcast TV, wasn't even cable.
No, not at all. No. And it was crazy. Like I said, you had these characters. They were all females. There was a couple male like guards, but it was all about these females. And Frankie was like this tough one, and B was this heavyweight. And they were always like fighting for dominance and control. But there was all these crazy sidelines, people killing themselves. There's flashbacks to a lady who she claims she was wrongly found guilty of murdering her husband. And I remember that like a psycho type of scene, flashback of him in the shower, and she kills him. Shanking was pretty big. They would steal a knife from the cafeteria or something.
Commissary.
The commissary, yes. Yeah, it was pretty heavy crap, but
wow,
we enjoyed it. It was nuts. And I looked it up, and I guess
was it filmed in that classic soap opera videotape style?
No, it was pretty rough because it was from Australia, so it was almost like something like the BBC would have produced.
Oh, really?
Like complete and utter lack of atmosphere. It was just, people in front of a camera. But that was my number 5. It was, and I had to really think like what it was even called.
When did it run? From when to when?
79 to 86.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was like 360 episodes or something.
And when did you watch it? I'm
gonna say probably like 80 to 84, somewhere in that window. Every day, it ran at 4:00 every day.
I'll have to look this up. I've never heard of it.
Yep, I didn't think so. And if there's probably, I'll be surprised if there's one person out there's like, I love that show. We didn't watch General Hospital. We don't watch any of the real soap operas. This was down and dirty. This was
I
great.
guess so.
So there you go, my number 5.
So now I'd like to bring up my first aside.
We've already gone.
This did not make it into my top 5, but it's one of these things. It's kind of like what Jeff was explaining, that you barely remember, but it always kind of heralded in the afternoon cartoons. I didn't see it much because you get out of school, the final bell would ring around 2:30, 2:45. You wouldn't get home until maybe 3:30 or so, depending how far you lived from school.
Yeah.
And the afternoon programming usually started at about 2 o'clock or 2:30. So you would always miss that first hour unless you were homesick, or if it was a holiday, or you had the day off from school, or if it was summer. So I rarely saw this because it kind of opened up the day's programming for afternoon cartoons and kid shows. And it was on WPIX, Channel 11. I have the barest memory of it because it probably only played for a couple of years, but it was called Bozo's Circus. And it was a live action with Bozo the Clown, this ringmaster MC, and they'd have different guests. They'd have stuff like Halloween parades. They'd have an audience of kids. And it
so
looked
they had like a peanut gallery, right?
Yeah.
That's literally where the name came from.
Really?
Well, no, I take it back. I think that originated with what was the Howdy Doody.
Okay.
And it was the peanut gallery. But,
yeah, it was just like that. So it was like a ringmaster with kids.
Yep.
And Bozo, I don't think he spoke, but he was just...
But Bozo's been around for years.
Yeah.
But I kind of remember that. Did they show like cartoons as well, or no?
Yeah, they did. They did. And again, I didn't see it much, but I just have this vague memory of it. So I went looking around online, and I see that it was actually taped in Chicago. So it was local to Chicago, and various stations around the country picked it up for syndication for after-school programming from, I think, 78 to 80. And that's when I would have seen it, when I was 8 to 10 years old.
That's probably something that showed up at like 5 a.m. on my Saturday morning.
Yeah.
You do know who the original Bozo actor was?
Tell us. I don't know.
Willard Scott.
Yeah, I did see something about that online, but I just kind of glossed over it.
Yep, Willard Scott was the first person to ever play Bozo.
That seems too obvious, doesn't it?
I think that's typecasting.
Like, who would you want to get to play Bozo? Willard Scott!
Bulbous goof. I'm going to just jump on that for 1 second, which is, you mentioned unless you were homesick that day.
Yeah.
I happened to be sick home the day Reagan was shot.
Really? So you saw it unfold?
That glued to the television, because obviously I can't do anything else. You can't change the channels because all 3 channels were broadcasting this story. Right. Our president was shot, and I was home that day.
I think they actually let us out of school early that day because that happened. Wow. It was either that or when the Pope...
I was sick the day I could have got out early. That sucks.
Yeah. Well, we went to a Catholic school, so it was either that or when the Pope was shot. We got out early.
Oh, God. I'm going to say probably when the Pope was shot.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Even if I got out early, I still wouldn't get home until 5 o'clock. Yeah, we were in the middle of nowhere.
There's a tie-in between Reagan being shot and one of our picks already.
Which is?
You remember the big SNL skit where Buckwheat is shot?
Yes.
Completely based on that coverage of Reagan being shot.
Oh, you were right.
Because, and the joke was that this was before media really took over. This is in the early days of mass media in the early 80s. Before cable TV took off.
Yeah, before Fox didn't exist.
A takeoff on just re-showing the footage over and over and over again. And Joe Piscopo playing the network anchor. Let's once again see the Buckwheat being shot. So they play it like 20 times. So yeah, Bozo was my aside. And I don't know if that contributed to my fear of clowns, because I have a fear, just like anybody else does. But Bozo was pretty innocuous, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, wait until next week when you got to review 2 clown movies.
Yeah.
I came up with a headline for my Instagram joke, by the way, which is, if a clown farts, does it smell funny?
Or do you have an aside you'd like to share with us?
No, we'll keep going.
All right, so my number 4 at this time, I would like to introduce the classic Tom and Jerry to the mix.
All righty.
Because this was a WPIX. They would show the reruns of Tom and Jerry. You kind of have to play roulette when you're watching Tom and Jerry, because obviously the best episodes, you may disagree, but to me, the best episodes were the classic Hanna-Barbera.
Right.
where it was Tom versus Jerry. Tom was always trying to catch, and Jerry was one-upping him in some way, shape, or form. I would always be on the side of Tom. I would, just for once, want him to grab
The
that
mouse
little
really just pissed you
bastard.
off.
Yeah.
Wow. So were you always rooting for the coyote as well?
Yeah, actually, as a matter of fact.
Yeah,
But again, if they ever caught, then there would be no cartoon, right?
that's true.
So
And that Roadrunner was a little full of himself.
he was full of himself.
Cocky.
Yeah. The coyote tried so hard,
But
so
was
hard.
he the only Roadrunner? Because really, it's like they can't all be that smart.
Yeah, and I think the Roadrunner stuck around just to torment the coyote.
He was a sadomasochist. Meep, meep.
Yeah. But at least with the Roadrunner and the coyote, they were always at odds. Later
Oh,
episodes.
you didn't like it when Tom and Jerry became friends.
Yeah, I know. And they went on adventures
Should be
together.
adversaries.
And that continues to this day. They make all these movies that I noticed, Tom and Jerry and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So they're along the ride with Willy Wonka and the kids, Tom and Jerry and the Wizard of Oz. And so there's this whole genre of Tom and Jerry stuff that is out there now. But to me, the classic stuff was probably from the 40s, maybe into the 50s, the Hanna-Barbera.
It was like Chuck Jones, right? Chuck Jones did a lot of those.
Well, no. Chuck Jones came along in the 60s. So he took up the Tom and Jerry mantle.
See, yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with you then because I prefer the Chuck Jones.
Okay, so that's when Tom had the really bushy black eyebrows.
Yeah. Was that the classic Froggy Wintergorton? He did right. Crambone.
No, that's the
that was the old one. That was the Hanna-Barbera stuff.
That's the Hanna-Barbera. And of course, the Hanna-Barbera version had Jerry's little French nephew.
Bonjour. Bonjour, the pussycat.
Tom met guillotine at the end of that episode and was beheaded.
Well, that's the genesis for Itchy and Scratchy, right? They just took the entire concept to the next level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I always loved those Simpsons where the kids just laugh maniacally at these animals getting slaughtered. Because we watch it, it's like you would hear about some kid jumping out a window because he wanted to be Superman. All of a sudden, it's like, cartoons are bad for you. And it's like, how many Three Stooges episodes do we watch? I never tried to run a saw across my brother's head. Listen up, numbskull.
But yeah, you're right. Tom and Jerry was only maybe 2 or 3 steps down the rungs of that ladder from Itchy and Scratchy. It was only a matter of a little bit of bloodlust, and there you've got Itchy and Scratchy. Yeah,
because he really, did he want to just kill him or did he want to eat him?
I think he wanted to eat him. It was kind of like a Sylvester and Tweety kind of a thing.
Fucking that was a good one. Tom and Jerry's actually. All right, you have anything more to add to your Tom and Jerry?
I do not. I'm done.
So my number 4 is actually a little bit later in my life. You'll be shocked to learn that I continue to watch cartoons well into my adult years. It didn't just begin and end when I was 12. This one ran from 90 to 92, and it ran on the WB Kids, and it is Tiny Toons Adventures. Steven Spielberg presents Tiny Toons Adventures.
Now, is this a spin-off of Animaniacs in some way? Or
no, I think actually Animaniacs came out of this. Animaniacs came after. So this is Tiny Toons, and this is taking all those. The concept was that all the Looney Tune characters that we just talked about taught at this Acme Acre Luniversity. And these were like the next generation. So you had like the Tasmanian Devil, but he was like a little kid, Babs and Buster Bunny. And they would go to school and they would learn comedy from Elmer Fudd, or they'd learn, but there was all these little asides, and they broke the fourth wall constantly. There was one episode, it was a contest, and a kid wrote the script, and then the winner, they animated it. And I remember specifically they were making a joke about, let's go see the pool. No, we can't. We can't show you the pool. It's too expensive to animate. Something along those lines. So it was very aware of itself. And I'm surprised it only ran for 2 years because I remember watching it religiously. But yeah, I was 23 years old, so I was well out of college. But it stuck with me because it was, they took all the Looney Tunes stuff that we grew up with and just kind of added it to the next level. But yeah, you're right. The Animaniacs were the Warner Brothers. Because it was part of that WB Kids, and they lived was it Wacko, Yakko, and
Wacko, Yakko, and Dot.
And they lived inside the Warner Brothers water tower.
Yes, they did.
And they had bologna in their slacks.
And that was such a funny show. And I've only watched that as an adult, because we were just looking in the library for stuff that we could take out for my son.
Yeah, that was another very, very aware of itself, clever.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We sat and watched that entire show, every season, every episode, probably in the past 2 years.
Nice.
I enjoed it more than he did. And
Did you?
made me sorry that I didn't, wasn't even aware of it when it was on TV.
Yeah, it was pretty well done. There was WB Kids. I mean, again, this was later on in my life, but WB Kids had a nice run with a bunch of stuff. I'll bring up Freakazoid if you don't remember that.
I've heard of that, yeah.
That's another one. He was like a goofy superhero type of thing. He almost made my list, Freakazoid, but he got bumped. So yeah, Tiny Toons Adventures was my number 4.
At this point, I'd like to make another aside. Because the tail end of my childhood viewing these cartoons came in probably about 83, 84, when I kind of paid less attention to the after-school programming. But right on the tail end, you would get a lineup that comprised of Inspector Gadget, He-Man, G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe, yep.
So these I all enjoyed. They didn't make my top 5, but Inspector Gadget especially.
Go Gadget Penis.
From Dr. Claw with his Barry White voice. Hello, Inspector Gadget. Like a Darth Vader, and he had Mad Cat.
On his lap.
At his lap, yes. So Inspector Gadget was always nice. And I always, to this day, when I'm stuck in traffic, I think to myself, go Gadget Wrecking Ball. And see something out of my car, just patting the cars in front of me away.
Did you race to the theater to go watch the Inspector Gadget with Matthew Broderick when it came out?
No. I thought I would keep the memory.
No. And then they made a second one. And it was with French Stewart. It wasn't even with Matthew Stewart.
Yeah. So we're up to number 3. Now, this I dug deep. So this is my prisoner, I think, of the list.
Okay.
It didn't even occur to me as a memory until I was going through some research on this show last night, as a matter of fact. So I was up until about 11:30.
You were cramming for today's exam?
And it was just like I was a kid again, because I hadn't thought of this show since I was, probably 8 years old. And I had completely forgotten about it. So I think this aired on Channel 5, WNEW, and it was the new Soupy Sales show. It was live action, and it was just a bunch of skits, and it was, for all intents and purposes, it was a kid's show, but a lot of the humor watching these episodes now work on an adult level. And so it's classic pie-in-the-face Soupy, and it's kind of like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but with Soupy in a red sweater, and he's got the same outfit every single show, and he'd have guests come over to his house. And the episode that I watched actually had Alice Cooper was the guest.
Oh, jeez.
These hands come in, like one was a brown Chewbacca hand.
White Fang.
Fang, yes. And the other one was like a brown Chewbacca hand that was called Black Tooth. And then he had a lion puppet called Pookie. So it was really based off of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But White Fang would just talk in nonsense, and the hand would come out. And all it was some guy's arm. It wasn't even a full costume. And then, of course, you get the classic pie in the face. Alice Cooper got a pie in the face, and there'd be a shot down whenever the pie would connect. And one of the episodes that I saw had Dick Van Patten.
Because really, what else was he doing?
They were doing a shtick where Van Patten was in a restaurant sitting down, and Soupy was serving him soup. And they did 8 jokes in a row of "there's a fly in my soup," and there would be a different punch every time. And so at the end of it, Dick Van Patten says to Soupy, "How many of these have we done so far?" And Soupy says, 8. Well, 8 is enough.
Oh, come on.
So he stood up and he left. And
maybe he walks out.
That was the kind of joke. And there'd always be people at the end of every one of these jokes laughing behind the camera. And it was always this deep guttural laugh.
So it wasn't like canned laughter. It was like people on set.
One guy laughing.
They hired the one guy. Hey, Bob, what are you doing? Come over here. Just laugh at these jokes.
Exactly. You picture it being the camera operator with a hoagie in his hand.
I can't imagine being on set when you're making jokes like that and you have to like maintain silence.
Yeah.
Because as an actor, I think it would throw you off because what you're saying is funny and it should be funny. And just from my limited exposure, like if I can get you to laugh at a joke, like it makes my day. So
yeah, I think that's part of the benefit is for the actors themselves, like you're saying, that they're getting some kind of a feedback from anybody that's in the room.
Right. Yeah. It's so funny that you, for whatever reason, this just sparked. Do you remember the show? It was on WWOR. which was Channel 9 out of Secaucus.
Are you going to say Uncle Floyd?
Steam Pipe Alley with Mario Cantone. Do you remember that at all?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't know what this is.
It was a live show, but I think they showed cartoons, but they had skits and everything. I just pulled it up, and I don't know. This had to have been probably late 80s, early 90s, because I was living in Queens at the time. But when you just mentioned Soupy Sales, for whatever reason, this just popped into my head. Steam Pipe Alley. Somebody out there has to remember it. Somebody has to remember Mario Cantone.
Yeah. Well, email us, tmipodcast2018@gmail.com, if you've got any picks of your own.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with my number 3, and this is going to be as obscure as they come because, again, I grew up upstate, and this was a local program. It ran out of it. It was filmed and it came out of Syracuse, but I watched it on WETM out of Elmira, and it was called the STM Club with Scooby-Doo. And it was hosted by Chester Drawers, and he was a ventriloquist dummy, and his friend was Denny Bowman. And they would lead in, you would have Scooby-Doo cartoons, then they would do skits in between. But they also showed Tom and Jerry, and they would show Three Stooges. But the big thing is that you joined the STM Club, and you got an official, little membership card. And then you could win prizes. Like they would pull names out of, I don't know if it was like one of those bingo things or whatever, but you could win prizes. I never won anything, but I remember specifically, I wasn't the only one who used to watch this too. And my friend Tammy, who lived up on the hill, I secretly joined her into the club. And then I would refer to her as Chester. And her mother thought that I was referring to her ample bosom. That's why I was calling her Chester. But I looked it up, and this guy, Denny Bowman, is still out in the world doing ventriloquism. And this had to have been, this ran 82 to 88. And it was just a local program that came out of Syracuse. And the guy's still out there. STM Club.
What did STM stand for?
I think it was because the channel was ETM. So maybe the Syracuse channel was something STM.
Oh, okay.
Syracuse.
So maybe
TM.
It was the call letters.
Yeah. So, but I looked it up, and it had a huge following. It was pretty big in the area at the time. And a lot of the characters that would show up on the show were just people who worked in the station. They'd slap on a fake mustache and show up on stage and do a stupid skit. I think years later, they morphed it into, I think it was STM Steamboat, and they were on a steamboat as opposed to just in a clubhouse. But yeah, that's where I got my Tom and Jerry and Three Stooges fixes, and obviously my Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo!
So what was that, your number 3?
That was my number 3.
That was your number 3. So we have not picked the same picks yet.
No. And our number 1 may overlap, maybe. I don't know.
Well, my number 2 is a little show called Battle of the Planets.
See, I got that on Saturday mornings.
See, I got it after school.
Yeah, there's a lot of, because I'm going through this and I'm like, I can't. I mean, if I want to stay true to, the topic, there was a lot of shows because Battle of the Planets was, that was killer.
It was. Now, this was a toss-up for me. The number 2 spot was either going to be Battle of the Planets or Voltron, and they have a lot of similarities between the two.
Yeah, but Battle of the Planets came long before Voltron.
It did come long before, and it was a superior show. I just viewed some random episodes of each.
Oh, it's one of the better openings.
Oh,
animated openings. Although I will say that my number 1 is got the greatest animated opening of all time. So we'll throw that out there.
We'll throw that out there right now. Yes, but it's exactly. Just a fascinating thing because Battle of the Planets came out. It was obviously based on a Japanese anime show called.
Yeah, it was Ninja
Science Ninja Team
Gatchaman. Which is just, I don't know why, we've mentioned this before, that Japanese just feel if you put science in it, that somehow it makes it cool.
Yeah, somehow it makes it legitimate, right?
Right, yeah.
So this producer by the name of Sandy Frank, and his name is right in the opening titles, so you make no bones about who's presenting this to you. After that, Star Wars happened in 1977, after that just changed the landscape seismically. This guy, Sandy Frank, somehow saw an episode of Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, and he decided to adapt it for American audiences. So it's very much in the vein of them bringing Power Rangers to the U.S., where they took the bare bones of this show, edited it down, added some American scenes to it. Like they did some new animation of Seven Zark 7, who was supposed to be this R2-D2 type robot that was in this Neptune sea base that would give the G-Force, which was Gatchaman team on the old show, but now they're renamed G-Force in the American show. So this Seven Zark 7 was the new addition. You never saw this character with G-Force. He was always like,
and the same thing, like you said, Power Rangers. That's that stupid robot. That's a complete and utter Seven Zark 7 ripoff. But they went to the extent they changed the characters' names, like Mark, Princess. So they were kind of pulling a little bit from Star Wars to tie it a little closer together. But it was awesome. It was. I'm sitting here right now. I've got Jason and Mark action figures. I got Princess around somewhere. Keop, Tiny.
Keop. The interesting thing about Keop is his really bizarre speech pattern.
That's actually pretty damn good. And I always went, was he supposed to be an alien? No.
Well, no, because I watched the first episode this past weekend, and they explain him that he was made in the lab.
Get out of here.
But some of his DNA was defective, and that's why he talks like that.
Oh, shit.
Seven Zark 7 actually explains that Keop is a defective human that was made in the lab.
Well, I'll tell you, they're still making, I have some of the newer, probably from the 2000s. They've rebooted the show numerous times. It's a little more hardcore now, but and when that ship, the Phoenix, goes into Phoenix mode,
the Fiery Phoenix.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. Absolutely awesome. And I wish this was on when I got home.
Yeah, it was on it was early on, and then kind of the Voltron era took over from Battle of the Planets. Casey Kasem doing the voice of Mark. And I don't know her name, but Princess was voiced by the same actress that did Judy Jetson. So that's a very familiar voice in itself. And of course, you had the fat member, Tiny.
Yeah.
I think sounds a lot like Frosty the Snowman.
Oh, he did have the go-getter.
He did. So maybe he was just he was channeling for, I don't think it's actually the same guy. But Seven Zark 7 was voiced by Alan Young, who also was the voice for Scrooge McDuck for 30 solid years. So
30 solid years. That's a nice gig.
Quite a voice cast. And as recently as July 2019, the Russo brothers are interested in revamping this as a live-action movie.
I think that we talked about that in one of our episodes.
We did.
Yeah, whether they're going to direct it or just produce it, but I guess it does depend on whether they go the animated route or live-action route.
Also, great villains in this. Zoltar was the one that always recurred. He looked kind of like a jackal with those giant ears.
And the big nose.
And his boss, called the Luminous One, which you just saw as like a ghostly head whenever Zoltar was taking his orders.
Oh, Luminous One.
So yeah, a great, great show. And apparently the original Japanese had violence, profanity, and nudity.
Yeah, baby.
That they had to edit out, obviously, for the American version. But you did always get a flash of Princess's panties when she was twirling around in the opening credit sequences.
Titillating, yes.
So yeah, it's a little bit titillating, the American version as well.
Yeah, of course, it was all man ass was the. That's where the boys got it from.
And that opening salvo, especially that shot of them all standing on each other's shoulders and making the tornado.
Vortex, yeah.
That's right from the opening episode. That's a scene from the opening episode. So
cool.
Yeah, so this is another one of these things that just brings you right back there to that space you were in when you were 8 or 9 years old. It's just so nostalgic to watch. So if you've never seen it, I would recommend you searching it out on YouTube or wherever. Battle of the Planets.
That's a good one. My number 2. This is maybe not. This actually impacted my life much more than I would probably give it credit for. But it ran from 1972, and it was a local program out of New York on PIX. Ran from 72 to 84, The Magic Garden with Paula and Carol. Sang their guitars, and they had Sherlock the Squirrel was this Muppet that lived in the tree. And I'm pretty sure that half of my personality and humor stems from this stupid squirrel.
And he was always trying to scam peanuts from Carol and Paula.
Yes, and he was pink. But they had all these little cutesy little songs and the Chuckle Patch, and there was just, they would do
the story
box. They would do skits, dressed in, put a cowboy hat on, and they would act it out. It was very childish, but it was something that I absolutely adored. And like I said, the only way I could watch this is at my grandfather's house at PIX. And sometimes it was a morning show for years, but it did go over to afternoons and up until like 84.
Now that's why I was going to say it was a contentious pick, because I remember it running in the mornings vividly.
Right. Yeah, but it did jump over to afternoons toward the end of its run.
Yeah, so, you're right.
So
I think this was one of those shows that actually heralded in the afternoon festivities. It used to come on quite early in the afternoon.
Right, like
the first kid shows
or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I will say that these two ladies, now I'm 50 plus years old, so these two ladies are got to be in their 70s. And I recently saw them. They are doing a live tour, and they're reenacting. They're showing like old clips from the show. They brought out the original puppeteer for Sherlock, and they did songs, and it was very interactive. And then we got to meet them afterwards, and it was really kind of cool. And I said to Paula, I said, I grew up with your show. And she looks at me and she goes, and grow up you did. And I'm like, Paula's hitting on me, man. Oh my.
Now, did they ever say your name during the Hello show?
I don't remember it, but when I Googled and I came up on Wikipedia, they mentioned the fact that somebody would always complain that they never said their name. But on Wikipedia, they gave an example, and they said, hello, Jeffrey. So I'm like, I guess they said my name at some point.
Yeah, I don't remember them ever saying my name during that song. Very disappointed that every morning I would wait and wait and wait.
We're fine, and how are you? I mean, these things stick with you.
I know. And to hear these songs again is just such a visceral, nostalgic shot to the arm.
And PIX actually reran last year. They reran their holiday special. It had not been on the air in like 25 years.
I saw that.
I mean, the production quality is horrible. They were shooting on tape back then, but it was just, it's just an innocent. Now, I never really watched Mr. Rogers or any of those other kind of like live action shows. And again, outside of the New York area, probably no one even knows what the hell we're talking about.
Right, true. I don't even know if it was syndicated outside of the state. So maybe nobody that doesn't live in New York knows what you're talking about. Yeah. But
if you want a nice little 70s throwback, look them up, The Magic Garden.
Yeah, and if you ever watched this as a kid and you haven't seen it in years, I tell you, and I often say that this, brought me right back to being a kid. This thing, if you watched The Magic Garden and you saw it back then, this literally does, more so than any other show. You are 6-7 years old again watching this, especially hearing those songs.
Transported. And I didn't realize they actually cut albums.
Yes. I found a couple actually myself. I went on eBay and I've got a compilation of their albums.
Of course you do. So yeah, that was a great show.
Yeah. Magic Garden. Yeah, nice pick. I think that came right after Love American Style.
So speaking of picks and WPIX.
Yes. Are you going to say what I think you're going to say?
When the video game, when ColecoVision and Atari first came on the scene, you could play Coleco football, and you'd call into the station and they would show the screen, and all you had to do is yell picks for the quarterback to throw the ball. And if he caught it, you won a prize.
Now it was more than just football, Jeff, because I researched this.
Okay.
It was sometimes they did football. Sometimes they did like a Pong thing. Sometimes they did like an asteroids. Like you're saying, what you did was you sent in your name, address, phone number to Channel 11, WPIX, and if they picked you, they called you. You had to be home You had
to be on the phone. Like, imagine the logistics of you're watching it on television, so it's delayed as it is.
Yeah.
And you're yelling picks. Now the guy on the other end of the phone either has to press a button or now tell the guy who's controlling the thing picks.
And literally, from what I was reading about this, it was some guy with a joystick
It had to be. Yeah, they didn't have any other technology.
Yeah.
But the 2-bit graphics were just, they looked like the aliens from Space Invaders. They didn't look like football guys.
Yeah, and as you said, the kid on the phone would just yell, "Picks, picks, picks."
Right.
Picks.
Right. Just give the kid a prize. Come on.
There was a delay, so you would think the kid was an idiot. Like, what is this kid? He's way off.
Picks.
I'd be like, just get me on there. Come on, just call me. So, and I think I did send in a card. Every kid sends in a card.
I didn't. Well,
the prizes were like a $10 savings bond, or a savings bond.
It's now matured.
So as a kid, you don't know what that is. You're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to get $50."
Right. Man, savings bond.
Yeah.
Just you wait, son. Let the annuities roll over. We're going to be golden.
Those were the days.
Picks.
So, okay, are we up to number 1 already?
I think we are up to
We're almost done. Oh. All right, my number 1. Drum roll, please. Live action. It wasn't made for after school, much like Tom and Jerry, Little Rascals. It was held over from way back when. These guys were the kings of Saturday morning TV in the late 60s, early 70s, going into the mid 70s and 80s, actually.
I know.
Sid and Marty Krofft. So there was a show on WPIX called Krofft Superstars. And what it was, you never knew what you were going to get. It was an hour, maybe a half an hour of a Krofft show. And they would alternately run the Bugaloos, Far Out Space Nuts, The Lost Saucer, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, Land of the Lost, I believe. But
HR Puffin
bona fide number 1 show that you would always want them to show, and they rarely did, was HR Puffin Stuff. And I would sit there day in, day out, just in the hopes that they would show HR Puffin Stuff. And don't get me wrong, I loved Ruth Buzzy and Jim Neighbors in The Lost Saucer.
Was that Dorf?
Wasn't Dorf. That was, you're thinking Tim Conway, Dorf on Golf.
No, they had a horse. Like a
little horse dog, right?
He was a Dorf because he's half dog, half horse.
So, and that one was Ruth Buzzy and Jim Neighbors and this Dorf that befriend a couple of kids, and they take off from Earth and they're lost in space, and they've got to find their way back to Earth to bring these kids back. The Far Out Space Nuts was Bob Denver.
Bob Denver. That's exactly what I was going to ask you, because I always get the two of them confused.
Gilligan and some skipper type actor, but it wasn't Alan.
It wasn't Alan Hale.
But
he was busy.
That one is also, they're 2 janitors that are cleaning up on Cape Canaveral, a space mission, and they're trying to slot in the astronauts' food, and Bob Denver hits the launch buttons instead of the lunch button.
That's an astronaut's favorite time of day.
They're having outer space adventures trying to get back to Earth. And of course you had the Bugaloos, which was I think that was, they were trying to make the new Monkeys with the Bugaloos.
Yeah, the Bugaloos I could have done without.
And Martha Raye as Benita Bizarre as their nemesis. They never did Lidsville on this show.
That's interesting. Because at least you had Charles Nelson Riley.
Yeah, Lidsville was just too bizarre. Because it is a very mean-spirited show if you ever watched Lidsville.
Well, the Sid and Marty Krofft were freaks. Just, again, the 70s, the crap that they must have been smoking to come up with some of this stuff. I mean, Witchy Poo was...
yeah, let's get into it. HR Puffin Stuff. That was the one you always wanted to see on this show. And it was a cut above the rest of the Sid and Marty Krofft shows, really.
Agreed. Land of the Lost was up there, though.
Well, Land of the Lost, yeah, that was classic in its own way. I think
that was another one I had to watch at like 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, Land of the Lost used to be a Saturday morning thing for me, and that was so good. That was on its own, I think, plane, Land of the Lost. Right. That really didn't fall into that genre of like McDonaldland type people in suits like Puffin Stuff was. Yeah,
because they got pretty heavy-handed after a while when they got the pylons and the sleeve stack and all kinds of other crazy crap out there. So anyways, back to HR Puffin Stuff.
Back to HR Puffin Stuff. And actually, it's funny. I mentioned McDonaldland. There was a lawsuit that the Kroffts laid out against McDonald's because when they were making all those characters, not Ronald, but Mayor McKees, Grimace, they were obviously based on those Puffin Stuff characters. And the McDonald's Corporation, or actually not the McDonald's Corporation, but the ad agency, I think hired a lot of the Croft
Oh.
from behind the scenes, and it came up with those characters, and the Crofts won a court case against.
Wow, they did.
Yeah, they did.
Is that why I couldn't get my Grimace action figure anymore?
They were awarded like $1 million. I don't know what came about. I don't think that they had to cease and desist those commercials, because you saw those right through.
No, and they ran for years with the Fry Guys and the Hamburglar.
Yeah, I mean, Hamburglar, Cling and Clang. They look.
True. Yeah, you're right. Wow, I've never really made that connection.
Yeah,
but you're right. The mayor. Yeah.
So Puff and Stuff, talk about a visceral, nostalgic flashback. That opening of Puff and Stuff, the theme.
It's like a 3-minute song.
Yeah, with Jimmy and his magic flute, played by Jack Wilde, who was fresh off of Oliver, being nominated for an Oscar for Oliver.
Yeah, I'll do that show.
And he was poached. I think he got $1 million up front to film the show.
A big chunk of change for a kid.
Now, he was of the, Gary Coleman variety, where he was very short for his age. So I think he was 16 when he filmed H.R. Puff and Stuff. But he was being passed off
Cockney accent
as an 11-year-old. Yep, with a Cockney accent.
Jimmy!
I think it was Marty Croft, actually took in Jack Wilde, and Jack lived in his house while they were filming, and he said that was a huge mistake because
I think
because he had 2 teenage girls, and all of a sudden you have this randy 16-year-old in the midst of them, probably
11-year-olds,
probably spying on them through the keyhole as they were taking a shower, right?
Yeah, he was showing them his magic flute.
But yeah, there was Jimmy, who got in Witchy Poo's boat that turned into an evil boat.
And that was awesome the way that.
It was that boat was awesome. I wonder if that still exists.
I don't know. You know what's funny? Because I think when we first got Netflix, HR Puff and Stuff was on there. Or maybe it was HBO. Either way, I turned my son onto that really early. And he would watch. It only ran 2 years at the most.
Yeah, only 17 episodes.
17. All right. He would watch them religiously every day. And it's just bizarre enough that because Jimmy was like the only human. I mean, Witchy Poo was, but she was, Witchy Poo. And I always loved the 2 monsters that were her dim-witted sidekicks. I can't
Orson
remember.
And Seymour.
Orson and Seymour.
Orson the vulture and Seymour the spider.
Yeah, spider. Is there supposed to be a spider? Okay. Very cool.
Yeah,
That's
Jimmy with his Cockney accent. It was pretty much, the 70s answer to Davy Jones. Was Jack Wilde.
Haircut and everything.
And he even had almost like a speech impediment on top of his British accent. So he would often say "terrific."
I don't know if I remember that.
And then you were doing the voice. If you could do it once again, the Magic Flutes voice.
Hey, Jimmy,
I'm frightened. And then, of course, you had Puff and Stuff himself. Well, geez, Jimmy.
Geez, yeah, he was like the lawman.
Well,
right?
See here, my good woman, he'd often say to Witchy Poo. Billy Hayes herself as Witchy Poo.
And she ate it up. I mean, how much fun must that have been?
But as a kid, I was kind of frightened.
Yes, I agreed with you. Agreed.
Because she had those, the white out eye makeup, the white around her eyes, and she had the
fake nose. Yeah, the big wart on her nose.
I think she was more frightening than Margaret Hamilton in The Wizard of Oz, as a matter of fact.
Agreed. Do you know what's funny? You mentioned The Wizard of Oz. I saw when it was re-released in the theater for the 50th anniversary. On the big screen, it falls apart.
Does it?
Because all of a sudden you're seeing the wire that's holding up the lion's tail. You can see clearly the difference where her makeup, the witch, the nose, the putty is slightly different color than the rest of her face. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we grew up 50 years on TV, so. But
Witchy Poo had her vroom broom, which was hilarious to hear Jimmy pronounce. Vroom boom. That's what
He never made it back off that island, did he?
He never did, even in episode 17. Now, it's interesting. This was a huge, huge runaway hit Saturday mornings in 1969. It premiered in September of 1969, and first-run episodes only ran until December. And that was it. It was just reruns after that. And NBC played it in reruns right up through 1972. And then ABC took it from 1972 to 1974, just the same 17 episodes over and over and over again.
Wow.
And by that time, the Crofts were already, done the Bugaloos, they'd done Lidsville, and they had moved on. But for some reason, they never did a season 2 of HR Puff and Stuff.
How come they never like merged all those characters together? Like one big massive end
They
game
kind of did.
crossover.
You remember Saturday mornings, the Bay
Apparently, I don't remember because I wouldn't have mentioned it.
There's the Bay City Roller Show, which was a Sid and Marty Krofft show. And in between the Bay City Rollers doing their shtick and doing songs, the Crofts did, I think, Horror Hotel, which was Witchy Poo. It was Charles Nelson Riley from Lidsville. All the bad guys from all their shows were the proprietors of this hotel, and it was.
But they played they played the same characters from the original shows.
But they did, yeah.
Wow, no, I don't remember that at all. Horror Hotel?
I think it was Horror Hotel.
I wouldn't want to stay there.
Yeah, no, neither would I.
I'll pass.
Neither would
Charles Nelson Riley with his ascots. He'd be pulling a tourist trap on me.
Let's not bring that up. I don't need to have nightmares from
We're trying to cleanse your palate with the cartoons now.
Yeah, Chuck Connors forcing his way onto a Sid and Marty Krofft set. I'm the new Christopher Lee. I'm the new Boris Karloff. Come on. Come to Slosson's.
Slosson's Lost Paradise. Oh, Oasis.
And one thing I read that Penny Marshall auditioned for Witchy Poo and did not get it, thankfully.
Interesting.
Can you imagine that? Hello, Jimmy. Hello, Pumpkin Stuff. Hand over your magic flute, please.
I'd be so afraid I'd just give it to her.
And then, of course, there was the movie version they came out with in 1970. So I think that they were trying to parlay Puffin Stuff into like a big movie career, but it never happened because the film version died a death at the box office.
It was trippy. I mean, if you want to say that show was trippy, the movie was even.
Oh yeah, and it was basically
out there.
Different plots from the TV show all kind of rolled into one for the movie version. So maybe someday we should subject Mike to this and cover 1970 Puffin Stuff movie.
I would love that.
Yeah,
that would be hard to find.
No, I've got it. I've got it.
Of course you got it. Doesn't mean my local library.
I think it's actually on YouTube. Actually, you can see the whole thing.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's easily found.
Is that it opens with Jimmy like running through the fields?
It's the same. It actually gives Jimmy a backstory. So it fleshes out that opening of
parents who don't care because they never came looking for him.
No, they didn't. No. And it's how you see how Jimmy meets the magic flute as well before he gets on that boat.
No.
But before we leave Sid and Marty Krofft, I just want to point out that in 1976, they actually opened for all of 6 months a World of Sid and Marty Krofft amusement park.
So sad that I never got to experience that.
And this was indoors. I think it was 5 or 6 different levels, 5 or 6 different floors.
So it was like a mall?
It was in Georgia, and apparently it was in a very bad neighborhood of Georgia, which is why it failed. Which is part of the reason why it failed, but eventually CNN bought the building, and it's now CNN headquarters.
Oh, that's cool.
But it had 5 or 6 different floors, and each floor had a different theme to it, which was a different Sid and Marty Krofft show. Like there was a Lidsville.
So like each floor was like a different world.
Yeah. So there was a Lidsville floor. There was a Puffin Stuff floor. I think there may have been a Bugaloo's floor, and each floor had its own ride as well.
I would skip to Lidsville. Yeah, I don't know that. What are you gonna? Were there like rides?
There were rides, yeah, and apparently because Sid and Marty Krofft had Land of the Lost in the mid-'70s, and they hosted a bunch of shows on ABC, NBC, whatever they were on, from the amusement park. So yeah, so this amusement park existed, and then as quickly as it went up, it was gone.
I have to look for that.
For one brief shining moment in the 70s, it was there, and you can actually see online if you go on there the pamphlet that you were handed when you like the map of the
map. Yeah.
So you could see what rides they had and everything else. So yeah.
Oh man, wow, that's too bad.
They tried to make themselves their own Disney type cottage industry, but it failed.
That's because they were freaks. Mickey and Minnie are not going to try and abduct you and take you to their castle.
The show in 1969 wasn't airing in Britain initially, so a lot of British rock stars asked the Crofts personally if they could send them copies of the show so they could watch it, including members of the Beatles, apparently.
Really well. It's probably best watched enhanced.
In a different state.
Right. Out of control.
So that was my number one, the Krofft Superstars show.
That's damn good. I don't even remember. I mean, I guess I vaguely remember that, but I don't think I had a lot of exposure to it. So,
like I said, it was WPIX. It was probably the finale of the afternoon festivities.
was that before or after the Brady Bunch variety hour? When did that run? That was actually on primetime.
It was on. Yeah, I was going to say that was a primetime show.
It was a primetime.
Yeah.
Boy, they really milked that for all it's worth, wasn't
it? They did.
It's crazy.
Like every 5 years, you would get a new primetime special with the Brady Bunch or movie.
Yeah, well, listen, they're right up there.
So I can't wait, Jeff. What do you have? What is your number one?
You even have a guess? I'm going to tell you right now that this didn't even air until 1985. So again, I was in
animated.
College.
Is it animated?
Animated. It is animated. And I was in college at the time, and you'd mentioned the block between Transformers and G.I. Joe and He-Man, but this was the number one show that I could not miss, and and you can fight me on this.
I think I know what this is. I think I know what it is.
Thundercats. Oh! Yes. Still. I got goosebumps just doing that. Loved this show. Thundercats ruled everything. And I think I only had like a little crappy black and white TV in my dorm at the time, but racing back from class just so we could catch that, maybe like 4:30. It only ran from 85 to 89. Now it's been rebooted twice. The comic books, Marvel had a line of comics. I think Top Cow had the license right, and they were producing comics. And they would do crossovers with He-Man and some of this other stuff. But those original, especially that first year, once they started bringing in other cats, I actually had two cats named Panthro and Cheetara.
Cheetara. That's got to be my favorite name is Cheetara.
Cheetara. And, of course, you can't talk about the Thundercats without the snarf. Do you remember the Burbles, which were like little robotic ripoffs?
Right?
They were like ripoffs of the Ewoks. They were like little teddy bears, but they were semi-fuzzy and semi-robotic.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's my number one show, Thundercats.
Now, did they have a toy line?
They did. They did, but, again, I was in college. I probably didn't have a lot of spare money. Not like G.I. Joe. Like the cartoons, I think, came from the toys, where Thundercats was organic in the sense that it was a cartoon first, and then
the toys came from it.
Yeah.
Now, you always hear about somebody planning to make a Thundercats movie, and it's never happened to this day.
No, which is bizarre. There for years, like right when the internet first came out, back when Al Gore first invented it, there was a fake trailer that someone had taken like bits and pieces of Brad Pitt from, what was that? Achilles, where he played Achilles. I can't even think.
Troy, right?
Troy, yeah. So there's all this found footage from different movies, but they somehow painted them to look like Thundercats, and they put it together in this trailer. I'm going to have to find it online because it was very well done, and it just makes you be like, we need this movie. So I can't believe that, that not even like an animated one. The last version of the show, they kind of went the Teen Titans Go route, where they're very cartoony and they kind of make fun. People just lost their mind. That's not my Thundercats.
Yeah.
It's not for you. Yeah, then they started bringing in some of the other, you had Tigra, but then later they brought in some of the other cats. But Mum-Ra, the ever-living, you can't go wrong with that.
Did they ever break into memories on this show?
Memories. Not to my knowledge.
Okay. That's a missed opportunity right there.
I would love to see him show up in this new Cats movie.
That would be great.
So yeah, there you go.
I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane as much as you did.
I find it funny that neither of us mentioned the ABC After School special. It wasn't on all the time, right? It wasn't like a daily thing, but like I just spent all day in school learning. They were always like these life lessons. And
they were always heavy-handed and overly dramatic, right?
Yeah, and I had never had any interest, but I just came across an ad for one. It was like, what happens when your son turns punk? Joey's dad was happy, and one day he came home with a haircut. How does he deal with it, I think The Boy in the Bubble is the most famous, right?
Was with John Travolta?
I think that was was that ABC After School Special?
I think it was ABC After School Special. And then this one is famous just because she lampooned it on SNL in the 90s. But Helen Hunt did one where she was snorted some angel dust and jumped out a window.
I do that with Helen Hunt.
Oh, yeah, the After School Special.
After School Special.
Yeah,
I like your choices.
Preempted like General Hospital or something. That's when they used to run that thing.
Yeah. General Hospital. They're like, yeah, we're not recording today because those soap operas filmed live, were they not?
Well, I think they used to in the 50s and 60s, and then it was live to tape, and then I don't think it was live in the 70s or 80s. No.
When I lived in Queens, the lady that lived next door to us, and I'll be damned if I can remember her name, was one of the directors on a soap opera. I couldn't tell you the name of the soap opera, but as a 18, 19-year-old kid, I was fascinated, and I talked to her all the time. And that was right when George Michael came out, and she was like, how does he keep like that stubble on his face? Does he just like come out every 5 days? And I'm like, maybe he just trims it. It's not like he shaves and then has to hide for 4 days until it grows back.
We're going way aside here. But
You've gone down the rabbit hole.
I remember reading an interview with Sammy Hagar right when he was in the middle of his Van Halen tenure, right? And he was extremely grumpy about the subject of Wham and George Michael. Let's put it that way, to put it mildly.
What do you have against Wham?
Just saying something to the effect like, well, this guy, he must go into a beauty parlor and say, make me look tough.
That's your gripe against George Michael?
That was his gripe against George Michael.
He's pretty.
Can't drive 55.
No. He doesn't even remember 55 now.
No.
Oh, that was good. I enjoyed that. Until next week.
Join us. We'll see you then.
All right, bye.
Talk to you later.
You got it.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIconfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
Picks.
Right.
Picks.
Right.